Hey everyone, Howie Fisher from Fisher's Flies. Thanks for checking in. Today I'm going to be tying up another Whip Finish Wednesday fly pattern from Demuth Fly Fishing. Link above if you've never checked them out. This is Charlie Craven's CDC Golden Stone. For the hook, I'm using an Ahrex Freshwater 555 in 12. You can obviously use larger if the stoneflies in your area are larger. For the bead, I'm using a 4.0 millimeter slotted tungsten in gold. And to add some extra weight to this, I'm using 0.01 lead wire wraps. If you have a bead with a bigger slot, you can obviously go a little bit larger, but the slot on this bead is one of the smaller ones. So I need to use some smaller lead wire to get into that slot. Once I've got it done, I'm going to slide it into the bead like so. For the thread on this, I'm using UTC 70 Denier in yellow, and I'm using 70 Denier on a smaller size like this to keep the profile thin so it sinks quicker. If you're tying up a 8 or 6 or 2, you could obviously use 140 Denier to build that bulk up a little bit. The tail on this fly is going to be pheasant tail in yellow. This is from Nature's Spirit. I'm going to go ahead and separate and pull off about somewhere between 8 to a dozen fibers. With this being a larger pattern, I want this to be a little bit more stout tail. I'm going to go ahead and measure this the length of the body and then transfer it to the back, as you can see here, and secure it on top of the hook. And I'm going to take a couple wraps over, and then I'm going to take one underneath the material. This will help it to stay in place and add a little bit of durability. I'm going to snip these butts off using my renowned scissors as always. Again, check them out if you have never done so. For the ribbing on this material, I'm using, and the pattern calls for 3 or 4x tippet. Anything larger will do. This is obviously to create some segmentation, but also increase the durability on the fly. For the backing on this fly, we're using large mylar flash or opal tinsel, Mirage opal tinsel. UTC makes this. A lot of other companies do as well, such as Semperfly, so on and so forth. So I'm taking a strip of that, and I'm going to, since I'm tying this in a jig variation, I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to tie this to what will be the top of the fly, but I'm going to tie this inside the hook bend, as you can see here. And I'm going to make sure that's secure on the top, because remember, as a jig hook, this is going to be riding hook point up. For the body of this fly, I'm using fiber fly dubbing in golden olive, which is really a yellow. And this is the UV Trout selection. Fiber Flies is a small veteran-owned and operated business. All of the materials that Fiberfly creates are made out of Alpaca. So it's a nice, very versatile dubbing. So I'm going to go ahead and make a small dubbing loop, or a fine dubbing loop. Again, trying not to build up too much bulk on this fly, even though it is a stonefly pattern. As a jig Euro variation, we want it to sink quickly. So that was the perfect amount. That was about a 3-inch loop. Once I get to the bead, I'm going to pull this flash over and again secure it to the top. Make sure it's where I want it before snipping it off. Then I'm going to take my ribbing material, which again is this tippet, and I'm going to counter wrap it. You don't necessarily need to, but this is just my preference. And once I get it to the bead, I'm going to go ahead and secure it both in front of and behind before snipping it off. To add a little bit more durability again on this fly, I'm going to go ahead and just take a very, very light coating of UV resin to the flash on the top of this fly so that that doesn't slip out, neither does the ribbing. Hit it with the UV light. The next step on this fly is the collar, and the collar is actually 2 parts. So the first part is CDC. I'm going to use yellow here. And I'm just going to go ahead and preen back the fibers on either side, just leaving the tip exposed. And I'm going to go ahead and snip it, not all the way off, but you can see just so there's a little bit of material for this thread to hang on to. So I'm going to secure it over top, and then I'm actually going to fold that butt back as you saw there. Go ahead and snip it if you need. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab this with my hackle pliers. And I'm going to give it about 2.5 wraps. Seems to be good, especially on these nicer feathers. I'm going to go ahead and secure it before letting go. And again, I'm going to wrap through these fibers, and then I'm going to take a couple wraps in front before snipping off the rest of that feather. So you can see there what 2.5 wraps does for you. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that that butt is secure so it doesn't slip out. The next step on this is a piece of soft hackle. Here I'm using Select 10 Saddle and Grizzly Yellow from Nature's Spirit, and I'm going to be pulling that feather from the bottom portion of the feather. I've stripped this feather in preparation, and I'm going to tie it in. I'm using a Kelly Gallop pattern here of a figure 8. If you do a figure 8 here and then cinch down, your feather should pretty much stay put. Next, I'm going to snip the butt end of this feather off if I have one, being sure to not snip off any of the CDC fibers. This next step is probably one of the hardest, and the hardest part of working with soft hackle feathers is trying to get the fibers to lay the right way, or the way that you want them to. So similar to the CDC, I'm going to take about 2.5 wraps of this feather while preening these materials backwards. Once I do that, I'm going to secure this as you see, and then snip that butt end off. It doesn't have to be super clean, as you can see here. You can use your thread to kind of push those fibers backwards if you need to. For the collar on this fly, I'm using Arizona Diamond Dub, but you could use any dubbing you'd like. You could use the same dubbing you used for the body. You could use a different sparkle dub. I used the Arizona Diamond Dub because I wanted a little bit of flash on this collar. So as you see there, I made a small dubbing noodle, wrapped it up to where I wanted it, and then whip finish. And that is the fly. Again, even though this is a soft hackle, if you tie it with a bigger size or with a bigger bead, you can use it as an anchor point fly while Euro nymphing, or as a dry dropper. So again, this is the Charlie Craven's CDC stone. Go ahead and tie some up, fish them, let me know what you think. Thanks for checking in.